This is the Padua Podcast Network.
You know, saints never think that they're becoming saints. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
You know, they're in that place in their spiritual life where they've given themselves so much to Jesus that it's Jesus living in them and his truth living in them in those moments. And it's just like, well, this is the truth. And we're just going to stand for the truth and not think of the consequence.
Thriving in the Trenches. It's the podcast where you will hear stories from real people with real purpose, all for a God who loves us with a real love. The Trenches, where life isn't always easy, but it is a place for women to be encouraged and equipped to uniquely and universally serve Christ in their feminine vocation. So, together, let's go deeper in our faith in God, in His church, and in our friendships. You are welcome here. Back for another episode. I'm so glad to have each and every one of you here with me. Rolling into the fall and into the winter, and as the seasons change, our lives are always changing, and I hope that you are seeing the Lord in your life. I hope that you are seeing that He really is present, even though the leaves have fallen and everything looks barren. And if that's how your life feels right now, then I pray that the Lord reveals Himself in a very big way for you today as you listen to this podcast. I really love this episode, and the guest really does a great job of sharing with us about love. Of course, we know that there are different types of love: agape love, just brotherly love, and then the intimate love that we have with a spouse. But today's guest is Richaél Lucero, and she really shares with us her journey of love before she fell in love with Christ, after she fell in love with Christ, and in that process of what was happening to her interior self, and then when she was ready to fall in love with her spouse, her earthly spouse. And Richaél is super educated, and I love the way she brings in theology into how she relates her story, how she relates her relationship and journey with the Lord, and really kind of brings to light some of those bigger words that we may struggle with understanding and applying them in our own lives. Richaél was cute. She said, well, that's not exactly how I thought that podcast was going to go. But when we were talking about what our subject would be specifically, I just kept coming up empty-handed. And I said, Richaél, can we trust the Holy Spirit that He is going to take our conversation where He's asking it to go? And of course, she's a great trooper. And she said, sure. I don't know if she was really nervous about that or not, but she did a marvelous job. Of course, Richaél is also a fellow podcaster. So let me tell you a little bit about Richaél before we get started. She is a speaker, and she is the podcast host of Clumsy Theosis. And if you've not checked it out, it is really good. She does take some bigger, loftier philosophical theology ideas and terms, and she really does do a great job of making them where we can understand them and apply them in our own lives. So I encourage you to check into that. But Richaél says she strives to manifest the Lord's command in Matthew 28:19, and that's to go and make disciples of all nations. After returning to faith, Richaél earned a master's degree in theology and Christian ministry from Franciscan University of Steubenville. As the founder of Clumsy Theosis Ministries, Richaél's mission is personal transformation of the faithful through a life of theosis that will transform the world and expand the kingdom of heaven. On her podcast, she achieves this by taking 2,000 years of Catholic goodness, drawing from the great minds and spiritual masters, boiling it down to give practical advice to 21st century Christians. Richaél and her husband Gary are active parishioners of their local Byzantine Rite Catholic Church. She has also enjoyed being a part-time theology instructor at the San Diego Diocesan Institute. So, if you go to the website, of course, I'm going to have all the links for you to connect with Richaél and dig into all the good stuff that she has. But for now, I hope you enjoy our little conversation. Welcome, Richaél, to the show.
Hey, Becky. It's wonderful to be with you.
Well, I am thrilled for my listeners to get to meet one of my fellow podcasters and just a wonderful voice that's out there treating us with lots of great information, with a little variety. And I would just like for you to share a little bit with our listeners, kind of that beyond the bio specifics. Just tell us about Richaél.
Yeah, so I guess, so for people that listen to me, a lot of times they'll think that maybe I'm an extrovert, or maybe I think that's a common misconception that people have about podcasters or people that are in the media, that we're all extroverts. I'm not. I'm an introvert. I prefer to observe situations and chime in, whenever something strikes me. I don't really like being the center of attention. I know, the irony, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
For Myers-Briggs, I don't know if anyone is into that. I'm an INFJ, one of the rarest personality types in the world, apparently. And I think there's been speculation that it's the same personality type that Jesus would have had.
Oh.
I don't know. Just saying. It's good. I mean, if that's true, I'm in great company. I'm married, been married for 2 years. We just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. We got married on the 100th anniversary of the first apparition of Our Lady of Fatima. It wasn't something that we planned to do. We just picked a date, and my husband was like, okay, I want to get married as soon as possible. We have 9 months. When is the first weekend? And that was it. And then I looked it up because I was like, I think I should probably figure out what saint day this is so we can start asking for their intercession. And I'm like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. So it was definitely Mama Mary. She's always had my back. She brought me back to the church, which she does too, with a lot of people. So that was just her way of blessing me and giving me just that little extra consolation.
That's very cool. So you said that she brought you back to the church. So were you raised? Were you cradle Catholic? What part of the world were you raised?
I am from San Diego, California, born and raised, and I am a cradle Catholic. My mom has 5 sisters, and they all went to Catholic school. And then, my cousins, a number of my cousins went to Catholic school. My brother and I went to public school. And I always said I was a Catholic. And even in my youth and in my early teens, I was a very strong Catholic. I really was not catechized at all. I went to the CCD, and that was just kind of wishy-washy stuff at that time. And my mom, she thought that I was getting this good education, at these CCD classes because it was at the church, and she had gone to Catholic school, and so she thought, I was getting something similar to what she got when she was younger. But going to public school, you see everything, you hear everything. And so I started to have a lot of questions in high school, mostly things having to do with morality. And I had questions, and the answers I got just didn't satisfy me. And then they all just kind of boiled down to, well, that's just what the church teaches, and that's just what the faith says. And I'm just like, but that still doesn't answer my question. And so I just kind of started to think for myself in these areas, even though I called myself a Catholic. And the people that I saw as Catholics, they were living lives that were very much the same as people who weren't Catholic. So I just kind of didn't realize that there was such a strong difference between what a Catholic life looked like and what a secular life looked like based off of what I was seeing around me. And I just kind of thought that what the church taught on morality was kind of antiquated and just didn't apply. And maybe they were just guidelines that we could just decide whether or not we wanted to follow them. And so basically I was living a non-Catholic life, but calling myself a Catholic. And then, with that comes not going to Mass, eventually. That just kind of happens,
Because that's just one of their old rules.
Exactly. Yeah. It's well, I love God, and I love, Mary, and, you say something about, oh, the church, and I'm like, oh yeah, the church is great. Oh yeah, I like going to church, but how often do I go to church?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So after high school, and you're kind of wandering in your own paradigm of, I guess, relativism, all the big words, right? So you went off to college?
No, I started into the workforce when I was like 15 years old, working while I was going to high school. And then so after I graduated, I just continued to work, and I went to community college for a long time, just taking like 1 or 2 classes a semester as they fit in with my my job. And yeah, I was just really just a secular person. I had a lot of my ideas about how we treat people and things like that. Obviously, those came from whatever formation I did receive as a Catholic, and that did come from like my family. The dignity of the human person. Although we didn't use that phrase or anything, but that still didn't apply to every human person. And there, I found myself in a place where I was dating someone, and it was just like a secular relationship, and we were together for a long time, maybe about 5 years, and then it didn't work out, and I was just kind of like devastated. Like I put all my eggs in this basket, and it didn't work out, and I just don't really know what to do or where to go. And I was saying this novena. I had this novena to the miraculous medal that I had actually got this little, pamphlet from my grandma a long time ago. And I pulled it out and I like read the instructions because I didn't know how to do it. I had never really done a novena. And I'm like, okay, all right, this is easy. I can do this. And so I read these prayers every day. And on the 9th day, like something like super big happened. And I was just like, okay, yeah, there's no reconciling this relationship at all. I need to go home. I need to go back home to my parents. I need to go back home to the church. I just need Jesus, because right now that's the only thing that's going to help me is Jesus. And that had never really been like a reaction that I had before. I need Jesus. But that was the first time I had that reaction, and I just was in this fog of like my whole life was just like crumbling around me, or the life that I had built up. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. And I was just kind of like in this zombie-like state. And I was just like, I'm just going to go to this church in my neighborhood, knock on the door of the office and be like, is there anything for anyone my age? And lo and behold, there was like a lot of things for people my age. And I was like, really? Oh my gosh. Okay. And so I started going to this Bible study, and I met some like really awesome people. And I was like kind of like a little sketchy about going in there. I'm just like, I don't know if these are going to be like weird, nerdy, awkward people,
People that hang out at church at my age?
I know. And I went, and they were like really interesting, really like cool. Like they were like way more interesting than I was. Like they had all these personal hobbies, and they were just like really smart, and they were very different from each other, but they all like just seemed like they were friends, and they were just laughing and joking. And it was just like, it felt like such a free environment. And I was just like, I think I'll be back next week. Like, this is great. And they just all started from there.
Do you remember what the Bible study was? I'm just curious.
It actually, I say it was a Bible study. Technically, it was called the JP2 group, which was a group that got together to study the encyclicals of St. John Paul II. At that time, he was Pope John Paul II. Now, I did not know what an encyclical was. I didn't even know that John Paul II had been one of our popes. So I was just there listening, and they would like read, they'd do like this roundtable discussion. They would read and then discuss. And even in the first meeting, like I felt like this inclination to just like join in the conversation, because like something just sparked me, and it was just like they were really smart, but at the same time I didn't feel intimidated, to just be like, yeah, that makes me wonder about this or think about this. I don't remember what it was, but at the, what exactly we were talking about at that time, but it did draw me in, definitely.
That's not light reading at all.
No, not at all.
Oh, wow. So you started really making friends and maybe seeing true examples of the Catholic faith. I mean, you're talking about when you were younger, the Catholics that you were witnessing were not really much different in their actions and choices than the secular persons that you knew. And so, I mean, that is such a testimony to how important our witness is as Catholics. I mean, I can agree. I once made a comment about coming back to the church, and I said, no, I don't want to go back to the Catholic Church. Those people aren't even Christians. They don't even act like Christians, because that had been a lot of my experience growing up.
Right.
And, though my dad's a deacon and my mom is a very devout, woman, my parents are very religious now, but it was, I don't know. I'm dingling. I don't know. But anyway, okay. So back to the witness of these people your age, digging into the teachings of the faith, and you were drawn.
Yeah, I was totally into it. And I was just being invited to one event after another. You know, they would know that I was a new face, and they would talk to me and be like, well, you know, kind of like a little bit, what's your story? But, you know, they wouldn't try to get all up in my business or anything, you know. But then by the end of almost every conversation I had, someone was like, oh, well, this church is having this thing, you know, next week. You should come. And I was just kind of like, yeah, I just need to go. And that was definitely the Holy Spirit putting me in this, I don't know how to say it. I'll say, now when I look back at it, I felt like I was like a zombie in my personal life. And the only time I did not feel like I was a zombie was when I was going to these events, you know, and I felt like the Holy Spirit was just like, yeah, you just need to go there and you're going to feel okay when you get there. And so I did. And it was the Holy Spirit and Mother Mary just guiding me the whole way. Because even at that point, I didn't know Jesus, you know. I knew Mary, and I could feel the Holy Spirit.
Isn't that crazy? Would you say it was because you were at such a low spot that your pride even was so, you were just so empty of self that the only thing you could do was hear Jesus, feel Jesus, let the Holy Spirit move you?
Exactly. That was it. I felt just numb. I didn't have any of me anymore. And that was a good thing, because the me that I had at that point was, you know, tainted with, you know, mortal sin and everything else that the world has to offer. And it just, even the idea of just going back out there and just picking myself up and, you know how they say, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just keep going. Even that idea just seemed like, I don't want to go that way. Whatever I was doing, that felt crappy, you know? Even now that at that moment when I was having those recollections, I was just yeah, I would rather feel kind of numb and just empty and void of self than to try to do that again, you know? And I think that was definitely a grace, you know?
Absolutely.
And, you know, there was no personal pride in the fact of just well, I'm just going to try harder this time. I'm just going to, you know, do a little bit more. There was none of that. It was just all right, I tried it that way. It didn't work. I'm up for suggestions, you know, and thank the Lord that I was given enough. I had said yes to enough grace to just be all right, I'm going to take my suggestions from Our Lady and see what happens.
Wow. Okay. So I got to ask, at what point or how long were you going to this group and starting to hang out with these great people that the idea or the prompting of the Holy Spirit to go to confession? When did I love the sacrament of confession. It's it's just one of my favorite. I hate it and I love it all at the same time because, you know, pride. And, but I love when people share how the mercy of God through the sacrament of confession just wrecked them and pulled them back in. Yeah,
it was, okay, so all of this started happening right at the beginning of Lent, right? And so one of the events that I had been invited to was the Maria Goretti group, which is here in San Diego at Our Lady of the Rosary. And everyone at all of these events I had been going to, they would go there on the first Friday of the month, which is actually today. So
yes.
So every first Friday they would have this Goretti Mass, and during Lent, what they would do, because normally it was like a Mass, and then afterwards you'd go for like a teaching in the hall and like social hour and stuff like that. But since it was Lent, they weren't going to be doing that same format. Instead, they had Mass, and then they had a Stations of the Cross. But the Stations of the Cross that they had, the meditation and the prayer intention for each station was linked to something having to do with chastity. And the person who wrote out those meditations and prayer intentions, she's actually one of my closest friends, and she was the maid of honor in my wedding. But she wrote them out, and they just like every one of them like spoke directly to my heart and my life. And it was just like grace after grace when we went to every single station. And it was just like, yes, I used to believe that, and I am totally seeing right now that everything that you're saying is so true. And yes, I need to heal that part of my life. And it was all these different facets of living a life of chastity versus living a life of sin, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And it just totally made me realize that everything that because I had felt that, but I hadn't put it together yet, that the reason I feel the way that I do is because of a life of sin. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is it. And after that, it was just like, okay, I'm just going to go to confession. And I mean, part of it is my personality. If I see that I'm wrong, I don't want to be wrong. And so I would rather be right than fight the fact that I'm wrong, So it's just like, okay, I was wrong. Let's fix that. Let's be right as soon as possible. So let's go to confession. And that's what I did. And it was just like, yeah, it was grace upon grace upon grace.
Wow. I mean, your story first of all, I love the story of Maria Goretti. And I mean, how can you not? Well, it's a horrible story, but the beauty of her willing to give her life rather than to give up her body and her purity is one that our culture just really needs to hear more of. We can be so short-sighted in the right now rather than thinking in the future and the eternal and the eternal ramifications of that choice. And I don't think Maria Goretti in the moment was thinking, well, if I allow him to stab me instead of rape me, then I might become this great saint. She was just thinking in this moment, what is more important? And it's hard to kind of wrap my mind around the willingness to protect yourself in that way, and to endure physical harm and death for it.
Yeah, I think, saints never think that they're becoming saints. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
They just have that they're in that place in their spiritual life where they've given themselves so much to Jesus that it's Jesus living in them and his truth living in them in those moments. And it's just like, well, this is the truth, and we're just going to stand for the truth and not think of the consequence.
Mm-hmm. So after confession, what did you find really changing in your life?
I just felt free. I felt like I was becoming myself, and I was being introduced to myself. I had lived like 20-something years already by that point, being someone that that wasn't me. And I was finally learning myself and learning how to be okay with who I am and what I like and what I don't like. And who cares if people that I used to hang out with or, people that I used to go to school with, like, who cares if they don't think or believe what I do? Because I really have a strong conviction that this is the truth. And there's a feeling that comes with being in the truth that I had never experienced anywhere before. And I was like, I'd rather just have this feeling and be alone than be friends with my friends, my previous friends anyways. But I just felt free. Yeah, free to love others and let others love me and not wonder, okay, what are they trying to get out of our friendship, our relationship, and just me being able to love people freely as well. Like for them to just, it was more than a culture shift. It was a total paradigm shift. It was just like this idea of people just loving purely and honestly just because another person is a person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. We're such a culture of consumerism, and that means we're consuming people too. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to live in that world, and honestly, it's kind of hard to when you've been kind of pulled back and you've been out of that world for so long, and you've been around really great people in your everyday life, and you haven't really been overtaken by the consumerism because you've kind of blocked it out, isolated yourself from it. And then when you go back into it, it's like a slap in the face, or it's stifling. It's disgusting. And then it's kind of mind boggling. Seriously, like you really think that? You really, you treat somebody that way? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, yeah, you hit it right on the head. Like that was my experience, going to be around people that I used to, to be around before coming back to the faith, because you want to like maintain friends and stuff. And it's just like, yeah, this isn't working. I just don't understand, how we're supposed to interact because you're trying to interact with me this way. And that's just not okay. And I'm trying to interact with you this way. And, it's just.
And they think you're crazy.
Exactly. And I did have like a few like arguments or fights or people, just like, I don't know what you're doing. You seem totally different. And I'm just like, well, I know that this is the right thing to do. And this is, this is what I'm supposed to do. And this is what I'm supposed to be. And if you don't understand that, I don't know what else to tell you. And like, just, raised voices and everything. But I mean, I can be passionate at times, no anger or malintent there, but it's just, the passion of those conversations. Mm-hmm. It's true. It happens,
Yeah. Well, Jesus changes you, period. Mm-hmm. He should change you. They should not recognize you. If Jesus really got a hold of you, then they should not recognize you. I mean, yeah. That's a beautiful witness.
And that's, yeah.
Okay. So was it about this point that you decided to go to school to Steubenville, or?
Yeah, by this time when I had come back to the faith, I had already transferred over to a university to finish my bachelor's degree, and I was it was a Catholic school, but it wasn't very Catholic in their teachings. But I had picked up a minor in theology because of all of this, and I was studying, and I remember taking these classes and hearing some of my professors and what they were saying, and I was just like, I don't know about that. Like, it just didn't feel like it was the right thing, like what they were teaching was correct. And I would go back to my friends and I would talk about what I was learning in class, and I'd have questions and they'd explain things to me. And then, they showed me where I can find resources online, like you can find the catechism online and it actually says this and your teacher said the exact opposite. And I'm just like, oh, okay, great. Thanks for telling me. And so it helped to spark that curiosity to want to know the faith, rather than just to return to Jesus. Like, I wanted to know what the church taught. And I had made a lot of really smart friends, people who just knew the faith inside and out. And they were helping me to learn things correctly, even if my teachers would explain things incorrectly. And so that was something that was just on my heart. And then I was just learning a lot more on my own by that point. And I was like, I think I want to go and get a master's degree, and a number of the friends that I had met here in San Diego, they had all gone to Steubenville at some point. Some of them knew each other while they were there, or some of them, weren't there at the same time. And not many of them were actually from San Diego, but for whatever reason, they kind of migrated and ended up here. And so I was like, yeah, like what they have, like their knowledge of the faith and their love of the church and the Lord and prayer. It's not just I love the church and what it teaches. It's they loved to pray. They loved to pray together. They loved to talk about the Lord. And I was like, yeah, I want to be around other people who are like that. And so I applied to Franciscan for my master's.
Okay. And so we get our master's. And is that maybe where you also picked up a certain significant other, or?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No,
I'm still waiting for
one
the love
of the
life
rare
here.
people.
No. Theology is good. Romance is great. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's funny. Like a lot of people, they go to Franciscan and they meet their spouse. For me, I was not really interested in dating. I just loved the person that I was getting to know, which was myself, I was getting to know myself through getting to know the Lord, like through prayer. And I wanted to spend my time in prayer. I wanted to spend my time with Jesus. And it was at Franciscan that I learned how to pray in that way, and actually I became familiar with Jesus as a person, and we created that relationship together. And that was just something that I wanted to do. And I had kind of considered religious life. I was discerning it a little bit, and it just kind of like didn't seem like it fit. And I have a friend here who's actually a consecrated single through a covenant community, and I was like, maybe that's something that I would like to do, because I kind of don't really feel that vibe that I need to find someone to get married and to have all these babies. That's just not something that I'm like, feel like, it seemed like the majority of the women that I knew were talking about that. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't really want to talk about that. I want to talk about Jesus. I'm not really interested in all that. But I discerned that for about a year, and that wasn't what I was called to. And then I moved back home, started working at Catholic Answers, and I met my husband here at Catholic Answers. And I wasn't even really interested in dating. I figured that like marriage was probably my vocation. And I was like, well, I guess I got a date to find the person I'm supposed to marry.
Good point.
And so I did go on a few dates, but there was just nothing that really I wanted someone who was going to be like a spiritual leader. And I didn't really feel that from any of the dates I had gone on. And I was like, well, I'm just fine, being by myself. If, God wants me to get married, if that's my vocation, I'm not going to go out and hunt down someone. He's just going to have to bring them to me. And lo and behold, he did. I was only working at Catholic Answers for maybe not even 6 months. And my husband worked here, but he worked in the shipping area, which was secluded and by itself, and you have to have a key code because that's where all of our inventory was. So I met him, I knew who he was, but we didn't start talking until about 6 months later. We both signed up to go to this safety course that Catholic Answers
that's
gave us
romantic.
permission to do. I know, yeah. Safety, right? Mm-hmm. First aid. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were there on the Saturday morning, and we were on break, and he's just sitting up there in the front of the classroom, and I'm just like, dude, why are you sitting in the front of the room, And so it was break time, and I was like, okay, I'm a little bored. Okay, let me talk to this guy, because I at least know who he is. And I was just starting to talk to him, ask him questions, and it turned out that we grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same schools, same parish. We're a couple years apart, but he has 3 other siblings, and I have a brother who it seems like everybody knows, my brother, and it's just neither of our families knew each other in any way, and it was just how is that even possible? We grew up in the same place, and so that it just intrigued me, and it was just funny because I would just think about him in between, because we had these classes every 2 weeks, and within those 2 weeks I would wonder. It was just how did this person exist in my sphere of life, and I never ran into them or knew of his family from a distance or anything. And that was really it for me. It was just I just started wondering about him, and then at every class we would just talk more. And I don't know. He said that he knew that he wanted to like ask me out or something, but he worked a second job on the weekends and at night, so he didn't have a lot of free time. And so he was like, I wanted to ask you out, but I knew I didn't have any availability to ask you out. So I just kind of just waited. And eventually one time we went out to lunch after one of those classes. And then, yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. And it just kind of like went. It just went. Like it kind of went fast. And I wasn't really aware of it, that what was going on, which is probably God's design because, he knows me and he knows that I probably would have been like, okay, wait, what's going on here? I need the details. You got to give me a timeline. I need to make sure it matches with what I want to do in my life. Mm-hmm. So to keep me from doing all that, he just kind of kept me a little preoccupied with my own life, my own goings on. And, yeah. And my husband just kind of like drove the whole thing once we started dating. And then I did blurt out one day. It was funny. On the Feast of St. Joseph was coming up, and I was starting to really like my husband. And I was like, all right, I don't want to have like this emotional attachment to someone that if it's not going to work out, I'm going to have to like undo all of this and like heal all of this. So I'd rather just like cut the cord now if it's not going anywhere. So I'm saying this prayer to St. Joseph, this novena leading up to his feast day. And I'm just like, I just want some clarification, just like if it's going to go somewhere, if it's not, whereas I think a lot of other women would be like, I just want him to be my husband. Just make him be my husband. I'm like, that's not me, man. And so we do the novena, and then we go out to dinner, actually. It was my brother's birthday, and so he had come out with us to go to dinner for my brother's birthday. And afterwards, we're talking, and it's kind of late, and we're sitting at the table in my parents' house afterward. It's just him and I. And I'm tired, and my filter, diminishes with every 15 minutes that passes on the clock. And I just blurt out, and I was like, what are we doing? And he's just like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like, with us, like, what are we doing? Are we dating exclusively? Are we just getting to know each other? Are we going to be friends? Like, he goes, well, I thought that we were more than that. And I'm just like, what do you mean? He goes, well, like more than just boyfriend and girlfriend. And in my mind, I'm like, what? He thinks he's courting me. He didn't ask my permission. What's going on? But yeah, I was like, oh, okay. And then it just like felt like super peaceful. And I was like, yeah, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. And so we were courting for a couple months, I think maybe 5 months or so. And then he proposed. And I was like, whoa, what? 5 months? Like, I need some more time. But yeah, that's how the Lord seems to work for me, like with the big things that I would like really want to drag my heels on, and just the Lord just kind of pushes them along without me knowing what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, excuse me. So y'all dated for about 5 months before
we got engaged.
Okay. That's so
and then we were engaged for 9 months. I know.
The shortest amount of time possible.
Yeah. He was like, I just want to get married as soon as possible. And I was just like, okay.
That's precious.
I think so. But it was a great time, really. I felt very free in our dating and our courting and in our engagement. And it was just like my prayer through the whole thing, like every day I would give him back to the Lord. Like, thank you for the gift of Gary and who he is and how he treats me and all of the graces he's brought to my life. Teach me to love him the way that you love him. Like, I wanted to love him purely. I didn't want to love him and make him like my God, like the person who has the solutions to all of my problems, or the person who brings me, all of the things that I need, because I still wanted to focus on the Lord. Like, I wanted the Lord to be my Lord. And I was like, okay, I don't want to love my husband, or he wasn't my husband at the time, but I didn't want to love him disproportionately. Mm-hmm. And so every day I would just give him back to the Lord and be like, he is yours, and I give him back to you. If you bring him back to me tomorrow, thank you, and teach me how to love him purely. Mm. And so it was just like every day I reminded myself that he is not mine, in that way. Like, he's not my possession. He's not here to cater to me, to give me things, to make my life perfect. Like, that's not what he's here for. And if we go through with this and we do say our vows on our wedding day, he is with me so that I could help get him to heaven, and he can help me to get to heaven. And that was something that we talked about a lot throughout our engagement.
Which is impressive because it's just so lost. I know I definitely didn't go through engagement or dating that way. It was always about what they could do for me. And again, it goes back to that idea of consumerism and, what can you do for me? The selfish type of love. I shouldn't even call it love. It's just selfishness and greed and all those other unfortunate vices.
Yeah, but you see, for me, it was like I had been there and I had done that already, in my life. And it was horrible. Like, it took me a very long time to heal all of that. It was probably about maybe 7 years before I ended up getting married.
Wow.
And there was lots of therapy that I had to go through. And it was just I don't want to do any of that ever again. It was just horrible. I could feel how detrimental it was on my soul and my person and my well-being. And just the fact that I could have done any of those things myself to another person was just I don't ever want to treat another person that way ever again. So it's just you live and you learn. And unfortunately, I had to learn all these hard things the hard way. But because of that, and my husband, he had never dated before. I mean, not really. There were some girls that he would kind of hang out with here and there, but he had never had a girlfriend, and thankfully was much more pure than I was. And it was obviously, by God's design that he kept us the way. I mean, obviously it wasn't God's design that I had muddied my, myself previously. Excuse me. But he knew that would be the type of person that it would take that for me to trust, and just to trust that he would not, fall into what, we're labeling today in this conversation, which I love, as that consumerism type of relationship. Mm-hmm. And I just saw that, he gets it. And I just want to spell it out and explain it the way I'm thinking about it to make sure that we're on the same page. And he was that's totally what I think. That's totally what I want. I was just all right, wow. I didn't think I'd ever find someone like that.
Well, and that's actually what I'm sitting here thinking of. I wonder, only because I have walked that same lifestyle and I've walked those same choices. And I just wonder if you would have thought, I'm not really worthy of something so pure and so beautiful and such a gift, a rare gift. But the Lord said, you are worthy, and this is the gift I have for you.
Yeah, that is a struggle that I hear a lot from people. I did not have that same affliction, thankfully. I've seen people struggle with that cross, battling with that lie a lot. But in my time getting to know the Lord previously and in our relationship, we had gone over a lot together, the Lord and I, just about who I was as a child of God, who I am as a daughter, what that means, what His mercy is, what it looks like, what it feels like, how true it is. And so I had spent a lot of time for, a handful of years just praying and just learning the truth. And through that, as well as through Catholic counseling, believing the truth. Believing that I am a child of God, and as a child of God, I am worthy of the gift that He wants to give me, which is the glory of heaven. And He wants to give that to me regardless of what I've done and who I've been. And I just have to say yes to that, and say yes to the life that is required of those gifts. And I did that. Every day I would do that. And I think maybe it was just a grace. that I was given, because like I said, I know a lot of people that do struggle with that cross, of thinking that they're not worthy. But thankfully that wasn't something I struggled with. I did, however, I saw the magnitude of like, wow, this person is like super like clean and pure, and like, I don't want to sully them with my, anything. And it was just like, I saw that what a big responsibility it was for me. Even though I believe, like a husband is the leader of a family, he's the spiritual leader of a family, I still saw my role in helping him lead by me being submissive to him and me letting him take the lead, or me prompting him to take the lead if he wasn't feeling up to that or comfortable with that, because I kind of have a little bit of a strong personality. And my husband's very phlegmatic. I'm melancholic, a little bit choleric, and he's phlegmatic, sanguine, like all the way. So like, I had to learn how to just step back and just let him grow into his role. And I had to learn how to grow into mine, not diminish into mine by any means, but to grow into it. And there's a lot of freedom in that as well. But yeah, I saw that I have a very important job here. And I wonder if it's similar to how parents feel when they have newborn babies, and they're just looking at them and they're just like, I'm responsible to help this person become a great person that lives out the faith and can go on, once my parenting time is done, and they can follow the Lord and become saints themselves. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe it's similar. I'm not sure.
Yeah. If you have the proper understanding of the vocation of marriage and what a family is designed for, and one of our purposes, our main purpose is to get each other to heaven. And, but honestly, I don't know how many people really get that. I know I didn't get that until we came back to the church. And then, then I realized, and, some of the decisions we made while we were walking in our Protestant paradigm, we probably wouldn't have made some of the same choices had we been formed in the Catholic faith and the teaching on family, but also we would have just raised our kids differently. We would have looked at our kids differently, not so much as a burden, but as that gift and that blessing. And I guess we always knew that our kids were not, quote unquote, ours, that they were the Lord's, but I don't know. I can say without a shadow of a doubt, we raise our children differently, walking in our Catholic faith than we did in our Protestant faith traditions, because we didn't just hang out in one faith tradition. But, I think that your story is beautiful, and I don't know if you've ever really shared it in that format, and as a podcast host.
No,
you typically don't give your whole story like that. So I hope that some of your listeners will even be blessed to hear your story really, really shared in a beautiful way. And I hope my listeners are blessed by it. Even more, I think that this conversation is really important for some of our younger, not younger listeners, but maybe some older teens who can handle the context of the story, because you walked in the path of moving away from who you were meant to be, and the pain, and honestly the years it took. And what a blessing that you did walk through that healing. 7 years. I mean, that's a long time, but it is a beautiful amount of time to truly heal yourself so that you are ready for marriage.
Yeah.
Because walking in that marriage with brokenness and wounds that are deep, that haven't been healed, it makes marriage a little more difficult.
Oh yeah, I can totally imagine. And the healing, it wasn't something, and I say this because I think some people, they look as like the healing process as something that they just want to get done so they can move on to the next thing. But like when you're healing with the Lord, that itself is an event. It's a falling in love. Like really, to be truly healed by the Lord, you need to like surrender your heart the way that you would surrender your heart to, the man or the woman that you are falling in love with. You fall in love with the Lord, and it's not, I think you do it a big disservice and yourself by just thinking of it as something that you just need to get out of the way so you can move on to your vocation, to what you need to do. Because, I mean, really, like I said, like I wasn't even like super interested in getting married. I was really enjoying my time with the Lord, and I was comfortable staying there as long as I needed to stay there. As long as I probably would have stayed there longer if my husband hadn't have been so, like he knew what the Lord was calling him to do. And that was just to, get in there and swoop me up before I knew what was going on. But yeah, and like even in marriage, it's, we talk about things all the time. Like I bring up things, or if something reminds me of a previous hurt or a previous wound or something like that, like we'll talk about it. And that's it. And he's really understanding, I'm very blessed with that. But I think like any man who's like in love, they can be understanding, it's something that they can all do. And I know he loves to do it because he knows that it's helping us. Like we have our goal in life as a married couple, and that is to help each other to become saints. And if we're blessed with children, to help them to become saints as much as we can during our time parenting them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I was going to say something and it just slipped my mind.
So sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, I said and it was there and then it was gone. Just in a blip. Let's see if I can pull it back. No, probably not. Well, I really do hope that your story touches someone and pulls them back home into the mercy of the Lord. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Healing really is the process of sanctification because it's becoming whole. Yeah. Mm-hmm, holiness, sanctified, it's all the same. Okay, so I want to definitely give your podcast a plug because what I think is so fantastic is that, well, first of all, they're shorter than mine tend to be, which is great, because you can catch a quick little lesson, but you're very instructional. You have quite a bit of knowledge. As I was telling you earlier, I've absolutely learned stuff from you, and you do have a deep spirituality. It's very obvious whenever someone is listening. So,
that's great.
I want to encourage my listeners when you're trying to fill in the gaps, because Becky can't push out a podcast except for every 2 weeks. And sometimes I even fail on that one. But your podcast is definitely a great way to fill our hearts and our minds. And I definitely want to encourage them to take a listen. And you have what? I think I saw 42 or something episodes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've lost count myself. I just realized that I've been doing this for a year, and there were a couple weeks where I took off here and there. So yeah, not quite 52. That's how many weeks there are in a year, right? 52 weeks?
There are, yes.
We're going to go with that. All right. Yes. But yeah, so there's like basically about a year's worth of episodes, one a week. Yeah, and I like to keep them short because I don't like to sit for very long and listen to things. And like I like to multitask and listen, but I find that when I do that, I lose, chunks of what I'm hearing, So like I'm trying to think about myself here when I'm recording. I'm like, hey, what would be reasonable for me to listen to?
Exactly.
So yeah, I keep them short. And you said they're practical, and that's something I really make it a point to do. It's like the spiritual life is something that needs to be practiced. And I'm giving like apologetic information. So I'm explaining the faith and I'm defending the faith, mostly explaining and teaching things about the faith, but not just so that people can know it, but because it's important to your spiritual life. The things that we believe, all of these ideas, maybe that they just might seem like they're out there floating, in space, like, oh, that's great, the church believes this and the church believes that. But like when you think about it yourself, you meditate on it and you make it part of your spiritual life, and you adopt practices that help you to grow in relationship with the Trinity, with the saints, with your neighbors, and just to become who you're supposed to be. That's my focus. It's just like everyone is like created so amazingly, and like people are intended to be saints. I mean, I don't know how else to say that, but like when someone's a saint, it's just like all the gifts and talents and treasures that God gave them are just set on fire, and it's just like a magnificent sight to behold, and I want to see everyone walking around that way. I mean, it glorifies the Lord, but then it's just like, it's also a pleasure for me because it's like they have gifts and talents that I don't have. And it's just like, sitting back and watching like this great like fireworks show or something, and you're just like in awe. And like every person that I encounter, I want to be in that kind of awe. And in the Catholic faith, it's just so easy. If you just learn a little bit, apply it to your life, make time in your day to pray and to just like adapt that and make that part of you, then you will be that force that God has created you to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you do apologetics, but it's not just apologetics. It is definitely, you do go into the spiritual life and formation and prayer. So I don't think we've even named your podcast yet. We're just going to make y'all go on a scavenger hunt to go find. I'm just kidding. I will obviously link it in the show notes, but Richaél, tell our listeners who the name of your podcast.
It's Clumsy Theosis. Theosis is Theosis. It's a Greek word for what in the West we would probably call, well, you will find it in the Catechism under deification. It's the process of becoming like God, which is the process of sanctification, of becoming holy. It's what we were created to do, and that's what the podcast is about. It's helping people to enrich their spiritual life and to own their relationship with the Lord. That's very important for me, for people to own their relationship with the Lord. It's not just something that they do on Sunday or when they just decide that they want to talk to God in prayer, but to really own that relationship. And in doing so, they strengthen the church and they become that witness that we were talking about earlier. Just by like living a life that's fully alive in the glory of God, and just like letting all your gifts and all of that just be enlivened by the Lord and His grace will make you fully alive. And that witness is something that I encountered when I met that group of friends through the JP2 group, and then through all the subsequent events that I had gone to because of their promptings. And there's just like people that were just, they're fully alive. They're on this path, this process of becoming fully alive, and I just wanted it. And I think if we all do that as Catholics, it's just, the whole world should become Catholic. Like just seeing that, everybody would want what we have.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your witness. Thank you for being willing to put your introverted self in front of a microphone and do so. Clumsy Theosis is a production of Catholic Answers, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And so we know that it's coming from a good source. They wouldn't let her talk on a microphone if she wasn't.
No, they would not.
No. Like, oh, yeah, cut that one. No, she's great. And no, I really do appreciate what you're doing and stepping outside of probably your comfort zone a little bit, and just
it's all for the glory of God.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you.
That's what I tell myself.
That's right. When you don't want to do it, but
exactly,
it does keep you going when things are tough. Sometimes you just want to quit, and when you put it for a work of the Lord for the Lord and for his children, it's kind of hard to say no. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I really do appreciate you sharing with us. And I hope people go find you and your podcast and, of course, Catholic Answers. It's always been, I've always enjoyed doing stuff with Catholic Answers. They're a real benefit and blessing. I know they've enriched my coming home. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you for having me. It was great. Didn't expect our conversation to turn out the way it did, but I'm glad that it did. And I'm hopeful, just as you are, that it will be a benefit and to help others be fruitful. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Thriving in the Trenches. I have hope that it will have encouraged you in your journey and that you will know the love of God even more intimately. Please share this podcast with a friend on your social media pages or leave a review in iTunes. You are welcome to join me on our Instagram or Facebook group where we can grow in friendships. Thanks for coming.